Hey everyone. I wasn't sure if I was going to make this video at first because it just seemed like the most fanboyish thing I could possibly do, and I don't normally review comics. But it's hard to resist the temptation when Fire and Ice is one of my favorite animated movies. It was a major influence on my artwork when I was growing up. I am a huge fan of Frank Frazetta's artwork, and I really enjoy the films of Ralph Bakshi. However, by some tragic irony, Dynamite Entertainment is one of my least favorite publishers. And there are a number of different reasons. For starters, Dynamite has a tendency of bait and switching their readers. They'll advertise an action comic only to give you a boring social commentary on vigilantism, giant walls of text on every page. And oftentimes they would replace artists between issues, and usually the replacements would have drastically different art styles. This was a problem I had when I read their Turok comics. There are times where the characters are completely unrecognizable. And not only that, but they also have a bad habit of constantly filling pages with ads for other comics, but after I read Turok, I swore that I would not read anything published by Dynamite ever again. But that was almost a decade ago. Quite some time has passed, and when I heard that they were making the Fire and Ice comic, obviously I was very skeptical. But the thing is, I love the movie, and I had hoped that the comic would at least be better than the other stuff that Dynamite has done in the past. And I don't know. I'm not too sold on the idea of it being a prequel to the movie rather than being a continuation of where it left off. I think it would have been better if they tried to set up a much greater conflict than what the movie already established. But I'm just not a big fan of prequels. Sometimes they can work, but usually it just makes for very predictable storytelling. They introduce all these new characters that were not in the movie, and as soon as they appear, you already know they're going to die. We find out that the villain Necron has an older brother named Caladan who is never mentioned in the movie, and he is killed off immediately after only appearing in a few pages. We're supposed to believe that his death is what sparks the war between the people of Ice Peak and Firekeep, as you saw in the movie. But since the character does not exist in the movie, Necron's brother just feels like a tacked-on fan character. And then we also get Tigra's mother, Dara, who is basically an uninspired jungle woman with no personality, and the only reason she was created was to show that Tigra is not a complete spoiled princess. I mean, in all fairness, this would actually make for a pretty interesting backstory to the movie if they were to actually develop each of the plot points more thoroughly. Now, I might not be a writing expert, but stories usually work better when you only have bits and pieces of information given to the reader one at a time. Here, though, the reader just has all the information dumped on them within the first issue. The most frustrating part was actually within the first 2 pages, and some of my Twitter followers probably already see me comment on this, but the writing is honestly the biggest problem with this comic, and the introduction is the perfect example of this. The way it starts out is that one of the characters is telling a story about a mouse that is caught between a dragon and a tiger who are fighting each other, and then on the next page right after, we got the characters explaining what the mouse in the story is supposed to represent. I realize that the golden rule of show don't tell might get cliche after a while, but when you have a metaphor in a story, usually it's because the writer wants the reader to use their head. They want you to think about what the metaphor is supposed to mean. Something that I loved about the Fire and Ice movie is that the story is mostly told through visuals. The whole second act barely had any talking, yet you still knew what was happening on screen. But with this comic, the writer is just explaining everything to the reader like a child. And what makes it even worse is that there's no story structure. It's just a bunch of scenes all spliced together of characters delivering dull exposition. We begin with one group of characters explaining what's going on, then we cut to another group of characters explaining what's going on, and then we cut to another group of characters explaining what's going on. And all that happens throughout the whole comic is that Larn gets captured by the witch that you saw in the movie, and Necron kills his brother, and none of it flows well at all, it's all just randomness. There's no time to just take in the story or even the artwork because it doesn't go anywhere. I personally think they should have waited until the second issue before introducing the witch. That way we could have had more time to develop the main characters and show off some more action-packed pages. The artwork is impressive for the most part, but if you're expecting to see anything resembling Frazetta's iconic art style, you're going to be very disappointed. There are some moments where it feels like the artist is trying to emulate the way Frazetta draws facial expressions, but then there's other moments where it just looks really sloppy. Out of all of the splash and spread pages, only one of them looked really amazing, but unfortunately it's ruined by the excessive speech bubbles and the terrible writing. Now, like I said, the artwork is very beautiful, but the problem that I have is that the color palette does not complement it very well. Most of it is very dark and washed out looking. It's like they wanted it to look real edgy, but it just makes everything look dull. And that's really sad because I was hoping that the splash pages would have been the highlights of the comic. One thing I will say though, I actually did like the backgrounds. Some of them look like they came straight from the movie. There's a lot of different details, and those are probably the best parts of the whole comic. And the thing is, I really do want to believe that this series will get better as it goes on, so I will keep on reading it. If next month's issue turns out to be any better, I'll do a review, but if not, then I'm not going to bother. I was originally going to rate this a 4.5 out of 10, but then something that I noticed is that Frazetta and Bakshi's names were not credited anywhere throughout the whole comic. Even if they had no involvement, most other comic franchises are still courteous enough to credit the original creators, but for some reason, this didn't. So for that, I'm knocking off 5 points. You should always give credit where credit's due. In the end, I can only recommend this to people who are big fans of Dynamite and are looking to start another collection. Anyway, I know that this isn't much of a video, but at the same time it's not much of a comic, so there really isn't a whole lot that I can say about it. So thank you for watching, talk to you later.